Hey, what's up everyone? So in this video, I'm going to walk you step by step through Project 7. So I'm going to show you the full process from start to finish. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm at the DA Electronic Music Notebook, which you can access through Teams or through OneNote. And go to the Projects section and then Project 7. Okay, so click on MusiCode V12. And this is going to take you to my Azure profile, which you can see here. And then in my projects, I have MusiCode V12. And so what you want to do is you want to clone this if you haven't done that already. Remember, you only need to clone it once. So if you've already done this, then you can go to My Projects and open up the cloned version of MusiCode. If not, go ahead and hit Clone, and then make sure it's public, and then you can clone. Cool. And then once you've done that, go to My Projects and open up MusiCode V12. And then you'll want to name this. So let's do that. So go to Project Settings, and you'll want to change the name and just add your full name to it. Cool. So go ahead and hit Run on Free Compute. And this will take us to our Jupyter directory. So this is the folder with all of the different files. So you can see all the lessons. These are all Python notebooks. And so for Project 7, we actually need to create a new Jupyter notebook. So I'm going to go up here to New, and then Python 3. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the title, and I'm going to call it Project 7, and then your full name. Whoops. Okay, so hit rename and good to go. So next thing we need to do is we need to import MusiCode. And so if you go back to your directory and open up the create wave and rest, at the top of every MusiCode Jupyter notebook, there is this cell, and it's the setup code that's required to run everything. So I'm just going to copy that and then paste it into this notebook here. So then I'm just going to hit restart and run all. And so what that'll do is it'll restart the kernel, and then it's going to run this cell of code. And so you need to make sure that you always run this cell of code at the beginning of every session. If you don't run this setup code, then you're not going to be able to work with wave files because you won't have sound file, and then it always needs to be initialized as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and start talking about this project and the things that we're going to need. So the first few things, the core things that we'll need is going to be drums, bass, chords, and melody. And so I'm just going to go through these one at a time. And yeah, so let's just go ahead and start with drums. So what we're going to use is the sample instrument. Okay, there we go. Everything's installing. Just keep in mind that all these messages is normal. If you see a warning, that's fine. It's just saying that there's a new pip version, which is not really relevant right now. And then this is for graphing, just to make sure that the graphs look nice. So it has to build this font cache list. So usually takes a minute or so. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll focus in on drums here for a second. So there is a method in MusiCode called sample. And so let's go ahead and say m.sample. And the way that this method works is you pass in two different variables. So the first one is going to be a string, which is a label for the sound category that you want. So I'm just going to say kick, and then comma, and then you can pass in either an integer number, so like 0, 4, 3, or you can pass in a string, which is the name of the file that you want to open. So let's just start with the simpler way, and we're just going to grab the first kick in the folder. And we're going to bounce that out so that we can listen to it. Alright, so it's going into the kick folder, and it opens up and grabs this kick. So we can see that this particular sample has actually 2 kicks in it. So let's go ahead and listen to that. There we go. Cool. So let's go ahead and let's listen to the next one. Cool, that's another nice one. And you can just kind of cycle through like that. Another way you can do it is we'll add a new cell and then say m.kick. And this will return the name of the different kicks. And so I particularly like this virtual riot kick. So I'm just going to, instead of using a number here, I'm just going to use the file name since I know exactly which one I want. There we go. Cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and store this kick in a variable. There we go. Okay, so now we have a container. So a few things we're going to want to do to this to start using it musically. And we want to time edit it first, because we can see that right now we have sort of this extra space here. And we can see that the sample is not quite 1 second. And so we want to think about what the best rhythmic value to slice this as. And so I think we could do an 1/8 note. So let's say time edit, and then we'll do 1/8. Cool. And then let's go ahead and just view the results here. Okay, so we were able to shorten that a little bit, so that looks a little bit cleaner. Okay, so now that we have our kick, what we're going to do now is we're going to create a rhythmic pattern with multiple kicks. So we're going to say kick equals m.join waves. And so the way that we create rhythms is we are going to combine kick with rests of different values. And so I'm just going to say kick, comma, m.rest 1/8, like that. And so what this is going to do is it's going to create a wave that is a quarter note in duration. And it's a quarter note because you have a kick, which lasts for 1/8, and then you have a rest, which is 1/8. So those two put together is a quarter note. And so what we can do is we can use the looper function to create a rhythmic pattern. So we'll say kick dot loop 4 times. And so you can see that we're actually able to just chain this on the end of the join waves. And this is a pretty common technique you'll see throughout this, where you're able to sort of chain different things onto a single line of code. And just think of it as like a series of operations. Okay, so let's bounce this out now. So we'll say kick.bounce. Cool, so now we have a rhythmic pulse. Cool, so let's go ahead and add a snare. So that looks good for now. So I'm going to just tidy that up a bit. We'll say kick. Cool. Okay, so I'm just going to run that. And then here we're going to do the snare. Spare. There we go. Okay, so first let's just take a listen to some of the samples we have. So m.sample, we'll do snare. And then let's just grab the first one. And then we're going to bounce out the snare. Bounce. There we go. Well, that's kind of a cool bamboo-y wooden one. Let's go Let's try that. A little boop. That's a pretty good one. All right, so I kind of think I'm feeling a clap for this. So let's check out the claps we have here. Ooh, I don't know, it's pretty good. All right, so we're gonna do a clap instead of a snare. So we'll say clap, clap. Okay, so let's do the same. Let's do the same thing. I'm actually gonna just substitute the name in. Sometimes these numbers can kind of be. Whoops. Let me grab that. Just say m.clap. So these are the different claps that we're working with. So just to see which one we're using right now, we're using clap 6. So I'm just going to sub that in there. Cool. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to time edit this, just like we did the kick. And so let's go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to time edit this to be 1/8. So in this line of code for the kick, we did a kick and then a rest. And so for this clap, we're actually going to do a rest and then a kick. And so that's going to create kind of the kick clap pattern that we want. So we'll say clap equals m dot join waves. So remember, we want to do m dot rest 1/8 and then clap. Okay, so these two should be the same length, so we need to apply a loop. So let's go ahead and just copy that loop right here. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and put these together. Let's just make sure that everything lines up. So we're going to say m.add waves. So remember, join waves is about putting things in a sequence, kind of one after another in time. Add waves is for adding two waveforms together so that they play at the same time, kind of like in a vertical sense. So let's go ahead and just say kick, clap, and then mix, bounce. All right, so let's run that and see how everything's sounding so far. Okay, so we can see that we have we just have that. So let's run both of these to make sure that everything's lining up the way that it should be. There we go. Okay, so that's kind of what I was going for. Not quite. So let's try this. Let's adjust the rhythm slightly. So we're going to actually do 1/4 and then the clap. So that total is going to equal, it's going to equal, let's see, it's going to equal m.rest 1/8. So this will balance it. Think of sort of like balancing an equation. So if this is 1/4, then this should also be 1/4. And so you have 1/8 plus 1/8 gets you 1/4. And so now you actually have to adjust the looping amount, right? Because you don't want it to loop. And so essentially what I'm trying to do is put the clap on this beat instead of on every other beat. So let's go ahead and run that and see if that works out. Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and now that we have that, I'm just going to copy that or cut it up, paste it up here. All right, so let's go ahead and do a hi-hat. So m.sample, let's do hi-hat, and then 0, and then let's go ahead and bounce. Okay, sure. All right, so I'm going to grab that. We're going to say hi-hat equals, and then we'll get rid of this for now. Make sure you don't ever store, if you're going to store something in a variable, don't bounce it, because then that's going to kind of mess it up. You want to just store the wave itself, not the bounce. Okay, so let's go ahead and time edit this, and let's also make it 1/8. And so this one, instead of adding rests, what we're actually going to do is just loop it, because we want to keep a more consistent rhythm. So we're going to go just chained onto the end. Going to loop it, let's see, 8 times, I think. Let's see. So one way we can kind of check ourselves here is we can use time. So we'll say kick.time, clap.time, and this is going to just give us the total duration of each waveform so that we can be sure that we're adding together the right durations. Alright, so all of them are 2, so that looks good. So now when we go to bounce the mix, we're going to need to add hi-hat in there. And we'll bounce it, and now we get this. Okay, cool. So this is a good kind of basic structure, and typically drums have more than just 3 elements, but these are really the core. So start with these 3, and then you can expand outward with more samples. But we'll keep it simple for now with this, and we'll want to loop it a few more times. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put everything in one cell. Now that we're kind of situated with the idea, we can create one cell. I'm going to just cut some of these other cells out that we don't need right now, like that. Cool. And I'm going to call this drums. There we go. Okay, so right now, if we run that, and then we say drums.bounce, so we have a 2-second loop. So this is just too short for right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to loop it 4 times. So we're just going to loop the entire drum loop here. So we'll run that again, and now our bounce will be 8 seconds instead of 2. So this will just give us a little bit more freedom. Okay, so these are the drums, and so the next thing we want to look at is going to be the bass. And so there's a few options that we have to work with here. So say bass. Okay, so there's a few ways we can go about this. So you have your basic create wave statement, which is sort of like the building block of many of the different methods. And then you have the sequence, and then you have arpeggio. So these are different ways to create different melodies, bass lines, and things like that. So the one I really want to focus in on right now is sequence, because I think it's the most broadly useful, especially for bass. And so let's go ahead and look at an example. So to create a new sequence, we're going to say m.sequence. And like create waves, we're going to pass in a list of strings. And so we're going to say E0, and then we're going to say saw wave, saw1, and then we need to pass in a rhythm. So we'll say 1/8, and then we'll say duration equals 1. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to create a pattern that just plays an E0 kind of over and over at an 8th note rhythm for 1 measure. And it's going to use the saw wave. So let's go ahead and just bounce that out and listen to what it sounds like. It'll have a really nice crunch. There you go. Okay, so what I tend to do is use sine waves because they're a little bit smoother, especially for sub frequencies, but you might not be able to hear it with the smaller speaker. But if you have a nice subwoofer, you will feel that. Okay, so we can also pass in more than one note. So let's say we want to do 3 E's and then go up to a G, G0. Okay, so I'm going to change that back to saw. Okay, so now we're going and we're switching between different notes. And let's actually we'll make that F to make it a little bit more different. So now we have E, F, E, G, creating that different. Okay, so now we have some different notes that are involved, and you can make this, as long as you want. Like this, I don't think that there's a limit as to how long this can be. I mean, really the only thing to consider is how long it will take. If you pass in, 100 notes, it might take a while, but I think it should work. It might hit a memory error if it gets really, really long, but you shouldn't have any problems with that. So we can continue to refine this. So maybe we stick with E here and then switch to F here, and then maybe do a B to bring us back to that E. So we have kind of a fifth then. And so we can experiment with different notes. We can experiment with different waveform types. All right, I kind of like that. So let's change the duration to 2. And let's hear how that sounds with a few phrases, because I kind of like where that was going. Here we go. Okay, cool. So let's do sine try. Sine try is a pretty cool, it just adds together sine and triangle waves, which is a really nice kind of pure blend. Sine waves have no harmonics and triangle waves have a little bit, so it's kind of nice blend. Sometimes kind of hard to hear, so let's just go with square. Actually, we'll do sine square because we want that fundamental from the sine wave, but we want the upper brighter harmonics from the square. So this tends to be a pretty good combination because you kind of want some brightness and you want the fundamental. Okay, sweet. So let's go ahead and we're going to make this. We're going to make this 4 measures because that's what we're working up with here. So we're looping 4 times, and here we're also looping 4 times. And so let's call this base, like that. Okay, so we'll run base, and then we're going to need to create a mix. So we're going to say mix equals m dot add waves, and then we're going to say kick, clap. Well, actually, we have a group for that, so we can just say drums and bass. So now we're taking the bass, drums, add them together, and then we're going to bounce it out. So these are the first 2 things, drums and bass. And so on top of this, we can start to build chords and things like that. All right, so let's take a look at the waveform. We can see we have the volume is getting up there towards clipping levels. So we might want to do some gain reduction on the mix, but we'll take a listen and see. Okay, cool. So that sounds pretty nice. So let's go ahead and just keep moving and we'll add in our chords and then we'll add in the melody. So for chords, there's a few different ways. So I'll show you very briefly kind of the basic way. There's a way that involves spelling out each note, which might be how you want to do it. But there's also a chord method which has the different chords like built in. So I'll just show you both methods here. So we'll say chords. Okay, so let's say m dot create wave. We'll say C3 E3, G3. So this is one way to build a chord. You can say, do saw wave, and then we'll make it one measure. So we can bounce this out and listen to it, and it's just going to be a C major triad. So this is the basic sense, and you can really pass in as many notes as you want, and it's going to essentially just add each one in to create the master waveform. So this is the first method. The second method is going to be the chord method. So we can say M, oh, there we go. So here's our C major chord. It's taking kind of long to load. There we go. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and, well, just to show you a little bit more. So say we wanted to make this, a C major 9, and then maybe add a sharp 11, F sharp 4. So now we have a C major 9 sharp 11. So this is, if you know your chords and feel comfortable just spelling it all out, you can do it in this way. Okay, but you might not know the chords, or you might want to just explore some chords you aren't familiar with yet. And so the second method would be this here. So we'll say m.chord. So the first thing we should look at is m.all chords. So this is all of the chords that you can use. It's basically all of them that I could find, all that I could think of. There's probably more variations or more extensions, and I know there's like slash chords and polychords, but for now this should cover it. So let's just take an example. So we could grab, major 6/9, and we could pass it in right here. And then the next thing we pass in is a root note. So let's just say C4. And then the next thing we pass in is going to be the waveform type. So let's try assign try. And then we're going to pass in a duration. So duration is going to equal, let's just say 1. And then we will bounce that. And so it should make sure you pass things in this order, but now we have a major 6/9 chord that starts on the C. Ooh, that's pretty nice. Maybe bring it down an octave. Nice. And so you can just sort of experiment. So it's like major 11, just a few little changes, and you can experiment with a lot of different chords without having to know how to spell each of them, right? Okay, so what we could do with this is we want to look at our bass line and sort of come up with something that makes sense with this. So we have E, E, G, F. So let's just start with this E here. So what we could do is we could say, let's do maybe a minor 11, and we'll choose E2. So let's just take a listen to that. Maybe bring it up. Cool. So I think we could do some sort of minor, like kind of E minor 11 to F major 13, something like that. So let's just give that a shot. So I'm going to say E, we're going to create a variable. We'll say E minor 11, like that. Get rid of this bounce. And then I'm just going to copy and paste to have kind of a template. And then we're going to say F major 13. All right, let's try that out. So then major 13, we'll do F3, and then we'll keep the same here. Okay, so let's listen to the chords together. So we say progression, or you could just say chords, which might be a little simpler. So chords equals m dot and then join waves, and then we'll pass in the E minor 11 and then the F major 13. Cool. And then we're going to bounce out the chords here. All right, so we can start to get a sense of if we like these chords together. And the major 13 kind of has it's almost like a dominant chord. It sort of like doesn't have a resolved feeling. So let's try something like major 9. So major 9 will sort of close it in a little bit more. Yeah, we might even try major 6-9. I think that would be even better. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna change this name. So we'll say F major 6-9. Oops. And then I'm gonna change that here as well. Okay, cool. So let's make sure we have our timing right here. So when we listen to this, oops. So when we listen, okay, so we want to, I think we have it right. So I actually think it's about, this needs to be 1/2, like that. Okay, cool. So let's try something here. So instead of just having 2 chords, let's try adding a third one in here. So what we can do with this chord progression is we can extend it a little bit more. And so instead of having it repeat this twice, we're going to put a different chord here. So it'll still be an F chord, but let's maybe pick a different chord quality. Let's try a Lydian chord. So we can sort of mimic the 11 that we have in this. So we can say F Lydian, and that looks good. And then we can pass that in here. So now we're going E minor 11, F major 6-9, E minor 11, F Lydian. You don't want things to be too repetitive. Okay, so let's see. So an index error, and we can see that it's pointing at F Lydian. Oh, right. If you type in the wrong chord name, so you can reference this here. So m.all chords. So if I pass in a name different than what's in this list, then it's going to give me this error. So you want to just make sure that you type in exactly what's here. So I just need to add chord there. All right, and then that should get rid of the error. There we go. Okay, pretty cool. So let's go ahead and loop that 2 times because we want it to match up with our drums and bass up here. Get rid of that. Cool, and then I'm just gonna move this mix down here. Okay, and then, so let's make sure that our chords are the way we want them, chords, and then we'll pass that into the mix here. And so what we should be expecting is the same duration, 8 seconds, drums, bass, and chords together. Okay, so we're starting to get kind of a groove now. I think one thing that would help here is if we maybe added just a little bit of brightness to the chords. I think that they're sort of clashing with the bass a little bit. So let's try that out as square waves. you wanna think in terms of mixing as well, and in terms of levels. There's a nice way to adjust volume of each individual thing, which I'll show you in just a second. Okay, so the chords have now just sort of blown out everything in terms of volume. So I'm going to go to the chords here, and I'm just going to go, I'm going to tag on another method. I'm going to say volume, and we're going to say 1 over, actually let's do 0.6. So that means a 60% of the original volume. So that'll duck it basically like 40% quieter. And so you can tag this onto any wave and reduce the volume to actually mix it. Okay, so one thing I want to point out is we sort of have this two different rhythms going on. So the bass is doing an eighth note, and the chords are sort of doing the sustain. So that's not always bad, but it's sort of causing some clashing. So I think I'm going to duck the chords back even more, and you can also add rhythm to the chords, which I'll show you in just a moment. Okay, so that's starting to come together a little bit better now. So let's go ahead and add our final element, which is going to be the melody. So melody. Okay, so there's a few different ways to do this. I'm going to show you both ways now. So first thing is going to be, we're going to say m.sequence. And so this is the same method we used for the bass. And so we can pass in a list of notes. So we're in the key of E minor. So let's try something sort of basic. We'll do E4, B4, G sharp 4. Actually, that would be major. We'll do G4. Okay, so this is just going to do a just kind of like a minor triad, and then we're going to say saw 1. We're going to say rhythm equals 1 over 16, and then duration is going to equal 1. So let's go ahead and listen to that. Okay, so that's pretty high, high and bright. Okay, so let's just make the volume maybe a little bit quieter, like 1/2. Okay, and then we will make those 3s. So what this is doing is it's cycling through these notes at this rhythm and that total duration. Let's try square wave for this. So now we have a nice little repeating pattern. Okay, cool. Not bad. Okay, so let's listen to what we have again here. Okay, so I think we need to adjust this. This is just muddying up the mix too much. I'm going to make this a sine triangle wave bass. And then we'll add that back in there. Yeah, you can only have so much crunch in the low end. You really need to, when it comes to bass, sine waves are usually the way to go. They aren't going to interfere much with the brighter frequencies of other sounds. Okay, so that's already cleaned up quite a bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's add this melody in here. So I'm just going to say melody equals, And we're going to want to loop this 4 times because right now it's 2 seconds. And so what we want to do is we want to make it 8 seconds so that we can mix it. So we'll grab our mix here, bring it down to the bottom, and then drums, bass, chords, melody. All right, so we can run that. So this is going to give us the full mix, everything put together. Okay, so that's the start. So let's get a little bit more interesting with this. So we have this 11 in here. So we know that we can use an A, maybe an upper register. So let's do an A4. And let's repeat this a few times and we'll alter it the second time. So we'll go E, B, G, A, and then E, let's maybe do G, B. So now we're switching the order that the notes are played on. And then we'll add that back into the mix. Okay, so this is 8 seconds. So what you need to do is you need to apply the principles I show you here to extend this outward. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how to take essentially a short kind of 8-second idea and expand it to be much larger. So I will see you in the next video.